I'm sure a lot of you could probably tell me the name of this smartphone right here simply by looking at the back of it. But for those of you who don't know, this is the Nothing Phone 1. And it's probably one of the most anticipated smartphones of 2022, and for good reason. But we're not going to be talking about all of the hype and the marketing behind the device, but simply be going over some of the pros and cons of the Nothing Phone 1 to help you decide if this should be your next smartphone. So with that, let's get to it. Probably one of my favorite things about this device is the clean software experience. This is a huge pro in my opinion, because there are a lot of devices out there from Chinese manufacturers, Korean manufacturers, and even Google here in the US. But a lot of those devices come with bloatware pre-installed on it, either from your service provider or simply based off of the region that you're buying into. But that's actually not the case with the Nothing Phone 1. All you really get here is Android 12 with a couple customizations sprinkled on top, like their Nothing font, which is used in the company's logo. It's spread throughout the UI, but then also the ability on the home screen to give your icons or folders a larger footprint, as you can see here. And you know, if you want the large Instagram icon there, it makes it easy to tap. Other than that, it's just a basic version of Android, which means you can customize it how you want rather than having to deal with the overbearing customizations that a lot of manufacturers put on their devices these days. Now, the next pro on my list is probably the thing that makes this phone stand out the most, and that has to be the phone's design. Now, when you look at the device from the front, there's really nothing special about the Nothing Phone 1 and how it looks, but that's definitely not the case when you take a look at the back of the phone. This here is a clear glass panel that shows off some of the internal workings of the device itself. Now, a lot of people were kind of disappointed when this design was originally shown off because we were told that it would be a transparent phone, hinting that we might see the inner workings of the device, and that's really not the case here. All you really see is the charging coil in the middle, but then you see some other items here, which leads me into the next pro, and that's the glyph interface on this device. What you see here with these little patterns, those are actually LED lights, which I'm going to turn on right now. This here shows off all of the glyph lights on the back of the phone turned on at once, and you can only really do this with the camera app while recording video using the glyph lights as a fill light, which honestly works really well. Definitely check out my camera test because I show off how this works in low light conditions, and it's definitely a lot better than simply having the flash turned on, which is this one right here. This is just a little bit too harsh for recording video. But the glyph lights also come into play for notifications. Simply jump into the settings of the device and then turn on the different glyph lights, and we will scroll through a couple here just to give you an idea of what they look like along with the notification sounds. It's definitely an interesting concept, and it even works with charging the device as well, as the glyph light at the bottom will slowly creep up as the battery charges when it's on the charger. If you didn't already know, the Nothing Phone 1 is actually a mid-range smartphone, which does mean it has a handful of compromises that were made in order to put it within that mid-range segment. But the first con on my list has nothing to do with this phone actually being a mid-range device. And that's that the Nothing Phone 1 doesn't come with a charging brick inside the box. You get a USB-C cable that you can use to plug it into a laptop or a charging brick that you might already have, but you're not going to get one with this device. And that's something we've actually seen in flagship tier devices for manufacturers kind of to say they're cutting down on their carbon footprint, but also it helps out with a brand like this in order to keep the budget of this device lower than what it actually would be if they had a charging brick in the box. And then on top of that, this only comes with 33-watt charging, where we've seen so many Chinese manufacturers roll out 65, 75, 85, or even 120-watt charging on their mid-range devices. 33-watt charging isn't necessarily slow by any means, since it can deliver a 50% charge to the 4,500 milliamp hour battery inside of this phone in about 30 minutes. But we typically only see it in larger manufacturers on their high-end devices like Samsung, Google, and even Motorola. Not something we'd expect to see in a device like this. But that does lead us directly into the next pro for this device, and I kind of hinted at this when I was talking about the design of the smartphone, and that's the fact that the Nothing Phone 1 has wireless charging. 15 watts to be precise, and also reverse wireless charging as well at 5 watts, since, you know, if you have a pair of Nothing's Ear 1 earbuds that support wireless charging, simply turn it on, place it on the back and you can charge your earbuds, or even if you have a friend that has wireless charging on their smartphone and they just need a top off at the end of the day. When it comes to mid-range devices these days, they're typically your only option if you're looking for a device that has a 3.5mm headphone jack and also SD card support for expanding the internal storage of a smartphone. But as I mentioned before, this phone does have some compromises, which means neither of those features are available on the Nothing Phone 1. The fact that the phone doesn't have a 3.5mm headphone jack built in so that you can plug in and listen to your music shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, simply because the company's first product was a pair of Bluetooth earbuds, which honestly pair really nicely with the Nothing Phone 1. But it's a little bit of an oversight not adding external storage to this device. You get 128 or 256 gigabyte options when you buy this phone, but most other mid-range devices still offer a micro SD card slot so that you can expand your storage and put as many movies or videos or photos on the device as you possibly want. This is simply just a play in order to reduce the price of the phone, which we're going to talk about now. I've hinted at this a couple of times now. This is a mid-range device. The price here is £399 in the UK, and if you're over in Europe, the price goes to €480. I do have to say, the pricing is really competitive compared to every other device that's on the market within the mid-range segment. This one definitely stands out as far as what features it offers, and especially with the design itself. But as I mentioned, the pricing for the UK and Europe, and it's also available in 40 other markets as well. But the Nothing Phone 1 has one major con when it comes to its availability, and that's the fact that it's not available in North America. If you're looking to buy this and you're living in the US or Canada, you're gonna have to find a third-party retailer who's gonna sell it to you and then ship it over. Now, there are talks that Nothing is gonna be eventually offering the Phone 1 with a specific US variant that makes sure that it connects to US carriers a little bit better, because most European devices don't play well with 5G, especially these days. But for now, it's not an option. I'm going to close things out with one final pro for the Nothing Phone 1, and that has to be the cameras on this smartphone. As you can see, there are two cameras on the back here. Both of those are 50 megapixels for the standard and the ultra-wide camera, and they can both record 4K video. And then for the selfie camera up front, we have a 16 megapixel camera that is limited to just 1080p. Now, that might be disappointing, but honestly, there are very few devices still to this day that can capture 4K video from their selfie camera, so not worried about that at all. But those two main cameras here perform incredibly well. So far, I've gone out and taken over 300 pictures with this smartphone, and I have actually been really impressed with the performance. For a mid-range device, you typically have a handful of compromises when it comes to the imaging sensors that the smartphones use, and also the computational photography. The fact that Nothing is a brand new company and this is their first smartphone with no history of computational photography yet, a lot of other brands build on year after year after year. I have to say, the results here are absolutely stunning. Now, those who really don't know much about smartphone photography will probably look at the back of the device and say, why are there only two cameras rather than the 3 or 4 that we see on other manufacturers at the same price range? Well, Nothing's done what we've asked them and pretty much every other manufacturer to do, to drop those redundant, unnecessary cameras that have macro sensors and depth sensors in order to just give us two really good cameras that perform incredibly well. And I think the results here speak for themselves. And that's going to do it. Let me know what you think of my pros and cons list for the Nothing Phone 1 and whether or not you agree with my conclusions. I do have a full review of this device coming up and a couple more camera comparisons as well, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon if you want to see them as soon as they're online. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.